America has spent 100 years telling jokes about these mountains and built its most visited national park in the heart of them. More than 11 million people came last year. That's more than Yellowstone and the Grand Canyon combined, and not one of them paid a dime at the gate, not because anyone chose to be generous. When the state handed over the only road through them, it wrote a single line into the deed. No toll shall ever be imposed. The country cannot charge for this place, and it cannot stay away from it. These are the Southern Appalachians, the mountains America looks down on and drives into more than anywhere else on the map. And the people here like it that way. In these hollows grows a wild onion so strong that mountain schools once sent children home after harvest, and the families who know the patches pass them down like heirlooms. The blue haze on these ridges is real, the breath of 1 billion trees, bending the light. And the Cherokee, who named this the land of blue smoke, are still here. They never left. But the mountains hold heavier secrets than that. More than 1,000 families were ordered off this land to build that famous park. 6 sisters refused to go. They spun wool on their porch while the tourists filed past. And every summer, descendants of the removed drive 11 miles of gravel to sing hymns in a chapel their great-grandparents built, in a valley where no one has been allowed to live for 90 years. Elk graze their family fields now. There is even a graveyard at the bottom of a lake here. The headstones never moved. Divers read the names by flashlight. These mountains have flooded people out and ordered them out. And still the people keep coming back. Ask them why, and they give the same answer every time. In western North Carolina, a sheer-walled chasm slices through the Blue Ridge, plunging nearly 3,000 feet from rim to river and hiding a place few people have ever truly crossed. Known today as Linville Gorge Wilderness, the Cherokee called it Iisio, meaning the River of Cliffs, where towering rock walls rise and no road has ever reached the river below. That isolation protected something rare. Over 10,000 acres of old-growth forest, spared because the terrain was too brutal for logging crews to risk their lives. Yet the gorge is not empty. On certain nights, strange glowing orbs known as the Brown Mountain Lights flicker along its edges, seen for generations and still unexplained. The river suddenly breaks at Linville Falls, dropping in 2 sharp tiers into a narrow canyon where the sound builds long before the view appears. From the upper overlooks, the water seems almost calm, but on the lower trails, the falls slam into a tight rock slot that looks and feels far more intense up close. Down here, the outside world cuts off completely. No signal, no road noise, just water hammering rock in a place that feels cut loose from everything else. That raw power comes with risk, and slick, wet rock has made this one of the sites where climbing off trail or edging toward the water is banned for safety. Spray from the falls coats nearby cliffs and ledges, creating cool, wet pockets where mosses and other moisture-loving plants cling to the rock like tiny hanging gardens. Even with the rules and warnings, people still stream in for the view, and Linville Falls continues to be one of the most photographed waterfalls in the southeast. Beyond the last drop, the river begins to roll more gently, carrying all that mountain water toward a calmer finish at Lake James, where the gorge finally lets it go. Here the flow that carved rock upstream spreads into a wide, still basin, its former rush flattened into a mirror that hides a flooded valley underneath. Beneath that surface lie old farm fields and pieces of the vanished community of Fonta Flora, now crossed only by boats and fishing lines instead of wagons and footsteps. Around the shore, bald eagles, otters and beavers work the coves, sharing space with bass and other fish that follow the old river channels sunk below the modern lake. On hot days, swimmers and paddlers play above a hydroelectric reservoir that still helps power nearby towns, turning the same stored water into weekends and watts at once. The calm surface can change fast when storms roll in, and sudden winds have flipped kayaks and sent whitecaps racing across bays that looked gentle only minutes before. Past the reservoir, the river continues under the watch of Table Rock and Hawkbill, with their quartzite walls rising high above the forest. Table Rock takes its name from that flat summit, a stone table that early travellers compared to a fortress, and even nicknamed the Gibraltar of America. While Hawkbill is named for its hooked crown that resembles a hawk's curved beak, a rocky profile so sharp that people can pick it out from towns many miles away. Together they form a jagged rim, with cliffs dropping so abruptly that noise from the trees below seems to fade before it reaches the top. Climbers turn these cliffs into a vertical playground, following lines up near vertical rock, while knowing that just beyond the rim, the ground falls away into dense forest. On hazy evenings, the stone can glow in low sun, the same look that once led writers to describe Table Rock as a glowing fortress and helped turn these peaks into local legends. Peregrine falcons claim these cliffs as family ground, and each spring, climbers step back so the fastest animal on Earth can raise its young undisturbed. Up close, an adult looks like a small jet with feathers, dark hood, hooked beak, bright yellow feet, and big round eyes that miss almost nothing. Long, pointed wings turn its body into a flying dart, built for speed rather than slow flapping. High above the cliffs, the bird glides in wide circles, watching for other birds below, then suddenly tucks its wings and drops in a hunting dive called a stoop. In that dive, it falls like a thrown stone with steering, slamming into its target hard enough to knock the prey out of the sky. A successful hunter often catches its meal in mid-air, then carries it to a ledge to pluck and eat in safety. At the nest, the parents share the work, one standing guard while the other hunts, both tearing food into tiny pieces for their fluffy white chicks. Young birds soon test their wings, first in short, shaky hops off the ledge before they dare try longer flights. Peregrines once almost disappeared from much of the country, but careful protection and cliff closures helped them return to high rock homes like this. All that wild stone gives way to brick, wood, and narrow streets in a place built for cotton and labour, Henry River Mill Village. Once powered by the river, the mill spun yarn for an entire company town. But after a fire ended the jobs, the houses, dam and company store were left behind to slowly decay. Years later, a movie crew searching for a real District 12 chose this ghost mill town, turned the old store into Mellark's Bakery, and even blew up a cottage for the camera. Katniss Everdeen's home props still sit inside one house, so walking here feels like stepping into both a forgotten mill village and the Hunger Games. Recognised today as a rare intact mill town, this village becomes a stepping stone to an old farming valley in the Smokies, Cataloochee. The Cherokee called this place Cataloochee, wave upon wave of mountains, and though the park later erased most of the farming community, descendants still return to Palmer Chapel. Meadows those families cleared are still open, and reunion tables still serve stories alongside apple stack cake, thin layers of spiced cake, and cooked apples stacked high to feed a crowd. Today the valley no longer holds ploughs or haystacks, but it is far from empty as heavy hooves and low calls roll through the grass. Elk have come back as giant relatives of deer, with long faces, big chests, and tan coats capped by a dark, shaggy mane. Bulls grow wide, branching antlers they use as both weapons and showpieces, squaring off in autumn to prove who is strongest. In the old farm fields, they spend hours with heads down, sweeping across the grass as they graze, turning abandoned pastures into a huge salad bar. Cows stay in close-knit groups, watching the edges while calves shadow their mothers and quietly copy every move. As the air cools, bulls grow restless and start bugling, high, eerie calls that slide into a roar and bounce off the valley walls at dawn and dusk. Each bugle claims space, draws cows closer, and warns rival males that this patch of grass already has a boss. Thick coats, strong legs, and sharp hearing. Let elk handle Cataloochee's storms, grazing in open meadows by day and slipping into the trees when they need shelter. Black bears, coyotes, and people can all be threats, so herd life becomes a shield, with many eyes and noses working together to spot danger early. Hoofbeats and bugles now share the valley with another sound from the woods, a low, steady drum that once defined these hills on its own, the wing beat of a ruffed grouse. On the ground, it looks like a small, chicken-sized bird in browns and greys, patterned like leaf litter, with a short crest on its head and a fantail that can flare wide in a snap. Most of the time it slips through brush almost silently, So what reaches you first is not the bird at all, but that trying to start an engine drum as its wings beat faster and faster on a hidden log. In winter, it can even dive headfirst into soft snow to sleep, using the white cover as a warm blanket. Beyond the cold mountain storms, Tennessee's Museum of Appalachia keeps the warmth of everyday life alive through quilts, churns, and log homes. It began when a schoolteacher refused to watch a hand-carved cedar churn become a lamp, so he began saving old tools, clothes, and stories instead. Soon, entire cabins, barns, churches, and shops were rebuilt here, board by board, including Mark Twain's parents' Tennessee home and a horseshoeing box pulled from the Clinch River after a great flood. Labelled churns, quilts, and banjos turn the grounds into a living scrapbook of Southern Appalachian tradition, where even small objects carry big memories. Quilts here tell their own story. Women gathered around a frame, stitching scraps from worn-out shirts and dresses into patterns learned by watching. Food carried the same spirit, from apple stack cakes built in thin layers for special days to beans and cornbread served after barn raisings, where a full table was part of the thank you. Music rose out of that work, with fiddle carrying the tune and the banjo driving the beat, learned by ear on porches and at barn dances until whole communities could play it. Meanwhile, a drowned valley called Lake Jocassee holds its own memories under clear water, where a hotel and cemetery still stand far below the surface. The water is so clear that divers can swim past porch roofs, gravestones, and even an old basketball court like they're moving through a ghost town inside a giant blue glass bottle. Jocassee's name comes from a Cherokee legend and means place of the lost one, a fitting title for a valley where towns, roads, and churchyards were drowned but never truly removed. Along the shaded banks and creek edges, cool spray and constant moisture create tiny pockets of life found almost nowhere else. In those pockets, Oconee bells bloom for just a few weeks each spring and rank among North America's rarest wildflowers. Each plant hugs the damp soil with round, dark green leaves, then lifts a short stem topped by a small, white bell-shaped flower that looks almost like a tiny hanging lantern. Most of the world's Oconee bells grow only around Lake Jocassee, tucked into cool spray zones along creek banks, so missing their brief bloom here can mean missing them everywhere. As the canopy closes and the bells vanish into shade, water takes over at Cullasaja Falls with far greater force. Here the river drops in a long stacked cascade, slamming off a sheer cliff and breaking into white sheets that twist and step their way down the gorge. Known to the Cherokee as Quilts, or Honey Locust Place, this river carries a gentle name for a waterfall that feels anything but gentle from the narrow pull-off above. Drivers see it from a narrow roadside pull-off on a blind curve, with drop-offs pressing in on both sides and little room for hesitation. The road itself is part of the story, carved directly into the gorge wall by workers dangling from ropes anchored high above the river. Below, no trail leads to the base, and no guardrail stands between pavement and open air, leaving the roadside pull-off as the only practical view. Past the falls, the mountains keep rising toward the highest point in the eastern United States, Mount Mitchell. At the summit, thin, sharp air and spruce fir forest make it feel like a patch of northern woods high above the Blue Ridge. It became North Carolina's first state park because people saw that this peak was not only tall, it held a rare high elevation climate and plant community that needed protection. The mountain bears the name of Professor Elisha Mitchell, who passed away here while verifying his own height measurements, and now rests at the summit he helped put on the map. Clouds often wrap the summit like a loose blanket, replacing clear views with thick fog in minutes, and leaving hikers in a grey tunnel where trees drip and the horizon disappears. Harsh winds, ice and cold have killed many native trees here over time, and crews have worked to replant, study the damage, and shield what remains of the high forest. Even summer nights can feel wintry on the summit, and only animals with special gear, warm coats, clever hiding spots and smart use of shelter can handle the long freeze. One of those survivors is a small predator with a bright coat and a heavy tail, moving through summit meadows and dark forest edges at dawn and dusk, the red fox. Its fur works like a built-in winter coat, with thick layers that trap warm air so it can hunt while other animals stay hidden from the cold. The heavy tail doubles as a wraparound blanket, pulled tight over its nose and paws, when Mount Mitchell feels more like the Arctic than North Carolina. Up here it feeds on whatever the mountain provides, from mice and birds to insects, berries, and even food dropped by people. Hunting begins with stillness. The fox freezes, tilts its head, listens for the tiniest rustle under snow, then springs up and dives nose first like a furry rocket. Broad, padded paws help it stay on top of crusted snow and slick ice, so it can sprint and pounce in places where heavier animals would slip or sink. Bold but cautious, it keeps to shrubs, fallen logs and snow humps, keeping them as cover while crossing open ground where owls or bigger hunters might spot it. With only a few mammals tough enough to stay active through long freezes, the red fox becomes an important hunter, helping keep fast-breeding small animals in check. Even so, not every summit resident fares as well. High on these slopes, one tree now faces a far harsher fight for survival than the fox ever does, the Fraser fir. It grows almost only on the tallest Southern Appalachian peaks, as if it chose just a few mountaintops like Mount Mitchell for its home base. Above 6,000 feet, whole hillsides of Fraser fir have turned into ghost forests, with pale trunks still standing where a thick green canopy once blocked the sky. The main enemy here is a tiny sap-sucking insect, the balsam woolly adelgid, small enough to miss at a glance, yet strong enough to kill most mature ones on these ridges. Younger trees still push up through fallen logs and rotting trunks, but every new tree meets the same hidden attack, forcing a long, slow rescue effort across the mountaintop. The struggle among the firs leads to an old ridge, where scientific history and human stories come together. Grandfather Mountain. Long before road signs used its English name, the Cherokee called this high spine Tanawa, or fabulous bird, seeing a giant eagle shape in rock and cloud. Later, settlers in the valley looked up and saw the profile of an old man's face in the cliffs, as if the mountain itself were lying down to rest. The rock here is part of some of the oldest exposed crust on Earth, older than countless mountain ranges that have risen and worn away. Its summit is the highest point on the Blue Ridge Escarpment, overlooking storms, shifting forests, and passing travellers for longer than any written record. The United Nations marked this single peak as a biosphere reserve, packing rare plants and animals into a maze of different environments on land once held in private hands. Famous wanderers like Daniel Boone and John Muir came here centuries apart, yet both were drawn to one bold ridge that seems to carry its own personality. Near the summit, the mountain offers another surprise, inviting visitors to test their nerves on the mile-high swinging bridge. Suspended between two rock peaks above a huge drop, it can feel like a narrow smile drawn across the sky on windy days. The bridge was built not as a dare, but as an act of care, a way for the owner's elderly grandmother to reach the high view she loved without facing a long, steep hike. Although the name Mile High sounded almost like a joke at first, surveyors later confirmed that the true mile above sea level point sits almost exactly at the bridge's centre. While people come for the wobble and the view, the ridge's most regular visitors are feathered travellers that follow this major migration route each year. One of the flashiest is the magnolia warbler, a tiny songbird painted in bright yellow with black streaks and white bars, like it flew out of a colouring book. In summer, it picks cool spruce fir forest for its nursery, tucking its nest into thick branches so chicks grow up hidden in a maze of needles and shade. Food here is almost all insects, and the warbler hunts by hopping along twigs, grabbing caterpillars, beetles and other bugs from the foliage, like a kid raiding a candy shelf. As days shorten, this little bird leaves the ridge behind and heads for Central America, turning the air above the peaks into a busy skyway for tiny long-distance flyers. Many warblers stack along one invisible road, each with its own colours and songs, so one morning of migration can feel like nature's version of rush hour. These peaks carry more than wildlife. Just down the road, the Oconee Indian village keeps old traditions alive through the rhythms of everyday life. Here, Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians walk through a full 18th century village they rebuilt, not as a frozen museum, but as a place where the old ways still happen in real time. River cane baskets are woven in patterns taught by elders, clay pots are shaped by hand without a wheel, and long dugout canoes are burned and carved from logs using fire and stone. Even the tools feel like a story. Slim blowguns cut from sourwood cane, arrows and darts made on site, and clothing that matches the dances still held in the council house. Everyday life in the village sits under peaks that can turn deadly in an instant, and none looks more dangerous or more unusual than the sheer white walls of Whiteside Mountain. From the valley, it appears as a giant pale slab, rising straight out of the trees, its south face so steep and sun-blasted that almost nothing can cling to the bare rock. Those cliffs drop hundreds of feet in one sharp fall, blue-grey stone streaked with white, forming some of the highest vertical rock faces in the eastern United States. The Cherokee told of a monster named Spearfinger who lived here and said the white cliffs were left behind when her stone bridge across the mountain broke away. In that legend, she could appear as a kind old woman, hiding a hard, blade-like finger under her clothes and attacking children who wandered too close to the cliffs. Rising air currents along this exposed face sometimes lift one of the biggest hunters in the sky, a dark bird with a golden neck gliding right across the pale cliff itself, the golden eagle. When the wind is right, it can circle above the rock for long minutes without a single flap, riding warm rising air like an invisible elevator as it scans the ground. Its eyes are so sharp, they can pick out a rabbit or ground squirrel far below. Then it folds its wings and drops in a silent dive that turns the whole cliff into a lookout tower. Heavy feet end in thick curved claws, and one crushing grip can take animals far larger than most other birds would even try to catch. On southern Appalachian peaks, this eagle is a rare visitor near the edge of its range, so one glide across the white wall feels less like another bird and more like a sudden VIP arrival. Around Whiteside, it tends to keep above quieter ridges and open rock faces, staying away from noisy trails so it can control the hunt without distractions. Prey here can include rabbits, ground squirrels, snakes and young birds, and the eagle shifts between fast plunges over open clearings and slow search flights over broken rocky slopes. For hikers at safe viewpoints, a single pass of this bird across the cliff can turn an ordinary walk into a "did you see that?" moment that lingers. That feeling of quiet, rare things hidden in these mountains reaches beyond the cliffs, because nearby even whole towns have emptied out and become forgotten places on the map. One of the strangest is Lost Cove, a tiny settlement above the Nolichucky River on the North Carolina-Tennessee line, accessible only by old tracks and forest trails. Families once farmed small plots, cut timber, and worked the railroad here, turning the cove into a self-reliant place, with houses, a school, a church, and fields carved into steep hillsides. As timber thinned and trains stopped reaching the community, the long hike made work, supplies, and schooling harder to maintain, and families slowly packed up and left. A few cabins, foundations, and a small cemetery remain along narrow paths, while weathered houses lean into the forest beside stone chimneys, rusted tools, and an abandoned truck. Even with the people gone, the shape of the cove still explains the old economy, with steep walls for cover and narrow exits for lookout posts, all built around one product: moonshine. Here, moonshine meant strong, homemade liquor, distilled from fermented corn mash, with copper stills hidden in caves and dense forest where officers had a hard time finding them. Because it was produced and sold without government taxes or licenses, every jar broke liquor and tax laws. As a result, families watched ridgelines while low fires burned and clear liquor cooled into mason jars that became the paycheck carried out by foot, mule, or hidden car. That tangle of steep hollows and hard lives leads into an even larger maze of peaks and valleys, known for its haze and history, the Great Smoky Mountains. Long before park signs, the Cherokees called this place the Land of Blue Smoke, from watching a soft blue veil hang over the ridges even on clear days. That smoke comes from the forest itself, as countless trees breathe out tiny vapours that bend light toward the blue-violet end of the spectrum and make whole valleys look misty. Along one sharp ridge, hikers reach a viewpoint called Charlie's Bunyan, named after a man whose sore foot was once compared to the knobbly rock ledge he stood on. On warm nights in early summer, parts of the park become a moving light show when synchronous fireflies flash together in waves, blinking on and off, almost like a living sign. Stories tell of Nunahai tunnels or secret passages beneath the mountains where spirit-like helpers travel unseen and appear when help is needed. Life around the Smokies also comes with strong flavours, and each spring, the Waynesville Ramp Festival celebrates a wild onion-like plant, whose smell is so bold it can clear a room. Ramps are fried, boiled and stirred into all kinds of dishes, and that sharp bite has turned into a badge of local pride, showing how people still eat straight from these hills. All these peaks, tails, lights and foods surround a national park that is free to enter yet built on land taken from thousands of its original residents, who were never compensated. Rows of simple cottages that once held summer crowds now feel calm and still, with selected cabins carefully repaired and kept open in the Elkmont Historic District. These houses began as a private resort, built so families could escape city heat and spend long stretches in cool woods beside the river. When lifetime leases ended, residents had to leave, walking away from porches, rocking chairs and board games as if the next vacation was still on the calendar. Only a handful of the original buildings escaped demolition, and those preserved cabins still stand with most interiors intact, as trees, moss and vines close in outside. Some visitors say the cabins feel cosy and eerie at once, as if the families had only just stepped away and might return at any moment. Empty porches and old paths here feel like a warm-up for the wide fields, barns and log homes that still stand on display in Cades Cove. This open valley once held many small farms, with cabins and plots scattered around shared pasture, where people, wagons and livestock crossed paths every day. Daily life depended on mutual help as much as crops, with neighbours trading labour, tools and food, so no one faced a barn raising, sickness or bad harvest alone. Corn shuckings made long work a social event, as families crowded into a barn by lantern light, stripping husks in fast piles, and cheering when someone uncovered a rare red ear. When the park arrived, officials cleared much of the valley, keeping only the most old-time cabins and churches to match visitors' ideas of mountain life, while forcing real residents out. One of the earliest homesteads, the John Oliver Cabin, still stands as a low log house that shows how the first settlers built simple, sturdy shelters at the edge of these fields. The picture of close-knit farm life leads straight to a nearby cabin where one family stayed put on parkland for decades under a special lease, the Walker Sisters' place. In this tulip poplar log home, 6 unmarried sisters chose to stay in Little Greenbrier Cove after accepting park terms that let them keep living by long-held mountain habits. They spun wool, wove cloth, tended orchards, and raised food much as their parents had done, creating a kind of living farm display. Visitors followed the trail right past their porch, sometimes buying handmade goods or stopping to talk, meeting women who treated passing tourists as just another season. After the last sister's time at the cabin came to an end, the house still stood and is now listed on the National Register of Historic Places. From this porch and orchard, the path continues to the Mountain Farm Museum, where historic barns and cabins preserve the story of mountain life. This place pulls together log buildings from scattered farms across the Smokies and lines them up so people can walk through a full working homestead in just a few minutes. The cantilever barn steals the show, with its upper floor jutting out over the pens below like a giant wooden shelf, built by mountain farmers with hand tools and raw timber. Around it stand the small buildings that sustained farm life: a smokehouse for meat, a spring house for cooling milk, an apple house packed with fruit, and a blacksmith shop for repairing tools. Carefully rebuilt, these weathered buildings now preserve a walk-through story of mountain work that might otherwise have disappeared. The whole museum brings daily farm life together, so it is easy to picture one family growing food, repairing tools, and storing winter supplies without leaving the farmyard. This little farm walk often leaves visitors curious about another working machine from the world of corn, grain, and hand tools at Mingus Mill. Here, a water-powered steel turbine hidden in a wooden flume drove one of the largest grist mills in the Smokies, with heavier loads and longer operation than the old wooden water wheels around it. Families from small farms hauled sacks of corn and wheat up this creek road, then returned home with meal and flour to last through long winters. Inside, grain still rattles through chutes, drops between grinding stones, and comes out as fresh cornmeal sold at the door. The whole building hums when it runs. Belts, gears, shafts, and that turbine moving together. So you feel as much as see how fast water once powered a community's food. Just beyond the parking area, a short path leads to a hilltop cemetery for enslaved people, where rough stones and scattered coins honour forgotten lives. Cornmeal in a sack is only part of the meal in this region. Another favourite is the ramp, a sharp-smelling wild leek that neighbours can recognise from across a room. These plants push up in cool, shaded hollows each spring, and families treat good patches like family secrets, passed down by memory instead of written directions. Harvest time is short, so foragers move fast, clipping only part of each clump and leaving enough plants behind to keep the patch going for years. The scent is so strong that some mountain schools once sent children home after lunch because classrooms filled with the smell of ramps packed in lunch pails. In Waynesville and other mountain towns, ramp festivals celebrate this foraged favourite with fried, boiled and stewed dishes as bands play and neighbours swap jokes and recipes. Many locals laugh off questions about where they pick, because sharing a plate of ramps is friendly, but sharing directions to a patch risks losing it to careless digging. As people head home smelling of ramps, the night belongs to the northern saw-whet owl, a tiny hunter calling from the tallest trees. This owl is about the size of a robin, with a round head, big yellow eyes, and a flat face that looks gentle, until you notice the sharp, dark beak built for cutting meat. In the high spruce fir forests of the Smokies, it perches low on branches or near tree trunks, so still and small that people can walk right past it and never know it was there. After dark, it hunts from these perches, watching and listening for woodland mice and other tiny animals, then gliding in fast and close, with wings that are extra soft and quiet. Its name comes from its call, a long run of clear notes that early listeners thought sounded like someone sharpening a saw on a stone. That call is a simple toot, repeated over and over like a backing up truck, and many campers only realise it is a bird when they shine a light into the trees. Life high in these mountains can be harsh, so the saw-whet's best tricks are staying still by day, flying low at night, and vanishing back into spruce branches the moment danger appears. For such a tiny bird, it has a big attitude. Some researchers have even been bumped on the head by annoyed saw-whets when they got a little too close. What starts as a single repeating note slowly grows into a chorus of overlapping bell-like calls that only Appalachian thrushes can fill these woods with. Four kinds of thrush share this park. One favours shady coves, another damp valleys, another cool spruce fir forests, and one passes through during migration. Their songs rise from these layers, like floors in a tall house, each bird singing its own short phrase so your ears can climb the forest, even while your feet stay on the trail. Some voices slide upward in smooth spirals, others pour out clear wooden flute tones, and together they build one of the most complex natural concerts in the eastern woods. People here sometimes say the forest sings from the ground up, because you can stand in one spot and hear different thrushes at different heights and at slightly different times of day. After this bird-made concert ends, the next playlist of mountain life waits in Georgia, where the Foxfire Museum keeps everything from log homes to oral stories under its care. On this hillside, more than 20 cabins, barns, a mill, a blacksmith shop, and a church were moved log by log from scattered farms and rebuilt by hand into a small town. Inside, people still hammer iron, split rails, weave baskets, carve wood, and make soap amid the sound of ringing tools and the smell of wood smoke. Its name comes alive after dark, when fungus inside rotting logs gives off a cold blue-green glow that once had children whispering the forest was glowing back. While Foxfire gathers mountain life in one place, but the Blue Ridge Parkway strings that life out for miles, linking farms, forests and towns in one continuous ride. Once called impossible, this scenic highway was carved along the ridges by thousands of Depression-era workers, with no billboards, no traffic lights, and a low speed limit. The road runs for hundreds of miles between Shenandoah and the Great Smoky Mountains, linking overlooks, trailheads, picnic areas, and mountain towns free of commercial trucks. On clear nights, some overlooks face Brown Mountain, where glowing orbs appear, swell and fade. Known as the Brown Mountain Lights, the century-old mystery has drawn scientists, ghost hunters, and curious families alike. Theories range from bent headlights to glowing gas and ghost lanterns, yet the lights appear rarely enough that people still pull over, switch off their headlights, and scan the horizon. Far along this same ribbon of road, the most stubborn gap was finally closed with a sweeping bridge that seems to float along the mountainside, the Lynn Cove Viaduct. Instead of carving into Grandfather Mountain, builders lowered more than 100 concrete sections onto 7 piers and kept the boulder field below almost untouched. Each segment fits so precisely that drivers feel one smooth curve, even as their tyres roll over dozens of slabs locked together like a giant stone zipper. For years, this short stretch was the missing link, forcing drivers onto lower roads while debates raged over how to protect the mountain and complete the route. When the viaduct opened, it quickly became one of the parkway's most photographed spots, where a glance over the edge reveals open air and treetops below. A few miles ahead, the road reaches a broad overlook high above the Catawba Valley, called Lost Cove Cliffs. From its stone wall, it drops away in a steep bowl of forest that was never logged, a packed tangle of trees, filling cliffs and ridges like one rolling green wave. Brown Mountain sits almost perfectly in line with the overlook sign, a long, low ridge on the horizon that has drawn campers, scientists, and storytellers for generations. Visitors come here not just for the valley, but for the chance to see the brown mountain lights, or glowing orbs that rise above the treetops, grow brighter, and slip away without a trace. Because the lights appear so rarely and differently each time, most travellers leave with stories, while a lucky few drive away convinced they saw glowing orbs dance across the night sky. Then, the next major stop along this ridgetop drive is a Gilded Age manor with its own web of trails and forests, known today as Moses H. Cone Memorial Park. The place began as one textile magnate's mountain playground, with Flat Top Manor at the centre, and orchards, pastures, and white pine alleys laid out to frame long, open views. Instead of short garden paths, he ordered more than 25 miles of carriage roads that loop over ridges and around ponds, so guests could ride for hours without ever leaving his land. In time, his widow donated the entire 3,500-acre estate to the Blue Ridge Parkway, opening a private retreat to the public, where those carriage routes now carry hikers and horseback riders. Hours of walking along old carriage roads often end at Price Lake, a still 47-acre lake where the ridge above and a drifting canoe reflect side by side. Pines and hardwoods crowd the shoreline, so from a canoe the forest seems to lean into the water, wrapping the lake in a green ring with Grandfather Mountain rising behind it. A loop trail hugs the edge, shifting from open bank to shady tunnel, and each bend swaps wide sky views for close tree trunks, in a way even small kids can read like scene changes. On calm days, the surface hardly moves, so one paddle stroke leaves a long silver streak behind the boat, as if someone just drew across the picture with a brush. Anglers line the banks or drift in small boats, casting for trout and bass, while rented canoes, kayaks and paddleboards slide past at an easy, story-friendly pace. Autumn brings bands of red, orange and gold along the shore, and many visitors joke that the lake is doing double duty, holding water and a second upside-down forest at once. In colder months, the edges can ice over, and some nearby routes even support gentle cross-country skiing, so the lake shifts from paddling spot to snowy backdrop without losing its calm. A little further down the parkway, campers leave the shoreline behind and tackle one of the most rewarding short hikes on the route, the 3-mile loop to Crabtree Falls. At the end of the loop, the creek drops about 70 feet over a dark rock wall, spilling across dozens of ledges to form a lacy cascade instead of one flat sheet. In spring, snowmelt and rain swell the creek, and the falls blast so strongly that hikers on the footbridge feel cold spray on their faces and hear the roar before the waterfall comes into view. By late summer, the rock face may carry only thin ribbons and tiny drips, reducing a thunderous wall to delicate silver lines when the creek runs low. Below the falls, pools and riffles act as hunting lanes for fish, frogs and sharp-eyed insects ready to snap up anything the current sends past. Those darting shapes above the creek are bright green dragonflies that hover, pause, then snap up smaller insects in midair like tiny fighter jets. Their bodies shine like hammered metal, with an iridescent green chest that flashes in the sun, so each pass over the lake looks almost like a piece of flying jewellery. Huge wraparound eyes give nearly all-around vision, and that wide view lets a dragonfly pick out a single gnat or mosquito the instant it lifts off the water. Once it picks a target, the dragonfly shifts from a hover to a lightning-fast dash, changing speed and direction so quickly that it ranks among Earth's most successful hunters. Here, these green hunters patrol invisible routes, then flick sideways to grab flies and midges before they can land back on the surface. Four wings work in perfect pairs, giving enough control to fly forward, backward, or hold almost perfectly still above a single patch of water. Fish, frogs and birds wait for any mistake, so a dragonfly survives by raw agility, using fast climbs, sharp turns, and quick landings on reeds or rocks just out of reach. Each insect can eat a surprising number of mosquitoes and biting flies, which is why people sometimes call them nature's tiny pest patrol along ponds and streams. But they are not the only hunters above the water. Much larger hunters work a different layer of air, swapping green armour for dark wings with bold white patches. Those broad wings belong to the bald eagle, circling over the river corridors, riding warm currents along the ridges before dropping toward the water in search of food. Above the lake, its white head and tail pop against the dark trees, so even far-off dots in the sky are easy to recognise as this one bird. This raptor rarely wastes effort. It holds its wings wide, glides on rising air, and waits until a single flash at the surface tells it exactly where to drop. When a fish swims close enough, the bird tips into a steep glide, stretches its talons like curved hooks, and lifts the catch straight out of the water without even getting fully wet. Around the parkway it also takes easy meals, dead fish, injured ducks, even roadkills, showing how a top hunter survives by skill and by keeping an eye out for free food. Once the beak and neck start working on a carcass, most crows and vultures hang back, knowing that a bird strong enough to steal fish from ospreys can also push them off a prize. This species nearly vanished from many rivers after harmful pesticides weakened its eggs, but cleaner water and legal protection brought it back to mountain lakes and southern streams. Now a bald eagle overhead points to healthy fish and cleaner water, and every sighting hints that the watershed is healing. After watching eagles ride the air, many travellers head for another height, made of solid rock, the 315-foot monolith at Chimney Rock State Park, above Hickory Nut Gorge. This massive block of gneiss rises into one of the region's highest viewpoints, where summit railings frame Blue Ridge ridges, stretching for tens of miles. Early visitors climbed hundreds of open-air steps bolted to the cliff. Later, owners blasted an elevator through the mountain so everyone could reach the summit. The rock has welcomed quiet hikers and Hollywood crews alike. Its towering cliffs became the setting for the final showdown in the movie The Last of the Mohicans. In recent years, a major hurricane tore through the gorge, damaging trails, trees, and buildings. Crews are still repairing the scars, so visitors can once again reach the highest overlooks. From the summit, the valley spreads far below, but one feature quickly steals the eye: a long white ribbon pouring down the opposite cliff. That ribbon is Hickory Nut Falls, a 404-foot drop inside Chimney Rock State Park and the tallest waterfall in any North Carolina state park. Centuries of water have etched dark stripes down the rock behind the fall, vertical bands that show exactly where the flow has run. During heavy rain, the curtain can swell into a pounding wall of water that throws mist across the gorge, while in dry weeks it shrinks to a thin silver thread clinging to the rock. On some days, hawks and vultures use the same rising air as the spray, gliding past the cliff at almost the same height as the falling water. Trails let visitors see the full drop from the rim above and then walk to its base for a completely different view. Far below the falls, the rocky Broad River slows behind a dam built in the late 1920s, swelling into Lake Lure at the mouth of Hickory Nut Gorge. A once narrow river channel now spreads into roughly 720 acres of water, flooding old valley floors and wrapping around cliffs, coves, and wooded hillsides. Film crews later turned this drowned valley into a movie set, and scenes from the movie Dirty Dancing gave the lake a second life as a pilgrimage spot for fans. The nearly century-old dam is treated like an ageing giant, watched closely by engineers after big storms such as Hurricane Helene to be sure it can still hold back flood surges. Heavy rain can leave the river above the lake looking clear again within days, while the reservoir below stays murky and oddly coloured as sediments hang in the water. On still evenings, rings of rising fish break the surface near old submerged stumps, and locals swap stories of roads and farm fields now buried under the lake. Around those drowned stumps and rotting logs, a different drama waits in the wood. Giant stag beetles preparing for a brief, intense life above the forest floor. Here, males turn those antler-like jaws into wrestling gear, locking and lifting rivals off dead trunks as they fight for the best spots and the best mates. Before any battle, each beetle spends years as a fat larva, hidden in rotting wood, chewing quietly in the dark until it finally digs out, hardens its armour, and joins the nighttime contests. As life fades inside the rotting logs, another mystery rises atop a distant mountain, where a massive stone wall with pits, rings, and a ruined gateway marks Fort Mountain State Park. The wall zigzags along the ridge for about 855 feet and swells up to several yards thick, like a rocky spine laid carefully across the summit. Scattered around that spine are 29 pits, cairns, and stone circles that look too deliberate to be rubble, and may have served ceremonies or signals that no one can now decode. Archaeologists still debate whether the wall guarded people, marked sacred ground, or aligned with the sun and stars. Older writers tried to credit Spanish explorers, or even a wandering Welsh prince, but the stones likely predate those stories and refuse to match any simple tale. Cherokee lore adds its own twist, saying the moon-eyed people built the wall, pale, bearded folk who struggled in daylight and were driven out in a full moon attack. Rumours of a lost temple and a stone serpent with ruby eyes still surround the ruins, while the wall now points to a different kind of guardian overhead, the Fort Mountain Fire Tower. Built in the 1930s by civilian Conservation Corps crews, this stone tower was designed to spot forest fires from above rather than enemies from below. Its observation deck offers a full sweep over the Cohutta Wilderness and distant Blue Ridge, turning one small room in the sky into a lookout for miles of forest. Long after human lookouts left the tower, the ridgeline gained a new watcher in the dark, the great horned owl. In Cherokee belief, this owl's call was more than noise, A hoot near a home could mean someone inside might not live through the season. Around Fort Mountain State Park, it patrols forest edges like a flying shadow, gliding between trees and snatching rabbits, skunks and even other birds with a crushing grip. Special feather edges hush the beat of its wings, so by the time prey hears anything at all, the attack is usually already over. Huge yellow eyes and a dish-shaped face work together like a radar dish, pulling in faint sounds from leaves and helping it find a mouse it cannot see. Tall ear tufts are really just feather flags that let the bird disappear among the branches or look larger to a threat, while the true ears hide lower on the sides of the skull. Although this owl can handle deserts, cities and farms, Fort Mountain gives it cliffs, dense woods and old stone walls within a single territory. On this ridge, the low double hoot rolls over trees and rock, the same pattern Cherokee listeners once heard here and took as a warning of bad news. Whether the builders of the mysterious wall feared that voice, honoured it, or had already lost its meaning is unknown, yet the owl still patrols the summit, as if guarding old secrets. Far to the east, the constant roar of tumbling water takes over Amicalola Falls State Park in Georgia. Amicalola comes from a Cherokee phrase meaning tumbling waters, the perfect name for a waterfall that drops 729 feet in stacked cascades down a steep mountain bluff. That drop makes it Georgia's tallest waterfall and one of the tallest cascading falls east of the Mississippi River, loud enough to be heard in the forest before it comes into view. More than 600 stairs climb beside the falls from base to summit, and each platform brings visitors closer to the rushing water. Around the falls, Chattahoochee National Forest weaves together hardwood trails, side streams and overlooks in one compact mountain setting. For many hikers, this is where the real adventure begins. With full packs and eyes on Maine, they set out on the first stretch of the Appalachian Trail. A stone arch near the visitor centre marks the trail's first steps. Most who pass beneath it never reach Maine, but every long journey begins here. Above the stairways and stone arch, Amicalola Falls Lodge sits on the summit, watching the valley and the start of the Appalachian journey from its windows. It looks like a modern mountain inn, with wood and stone walls, long rows of glass, and balconies so almost all 57 rooms face the forest and drop below. Inside, wide windows and open lounges make the view the main decoration, with chairs lined up toward the stair-filled gorge, and rolling hills where hikers head for Springer Mountain. The Cascades restaurant sits beside the lodge, where breakfast comes with fog drifting through the ridgeline and hot coffee overlooking cloud-filled valleys. On busy days, the lodge feels part hotel, part launch pad, with trail maps on the walls, gear piled near doors, and stories of finished and failed Appalachian walks traded over dinner. This peaceful trailhead leads to a very different mountain landmark, where wartime demand, a towering concrete dam, and Decoration Day still define Fontana Dam and Lake. The dam rose during World War II as thousands of workers laboured around the clock to power aluminum plants and the secret work at Oak Ridge on the atomic bomb. When the gates closed and the water rose, 4 mountain towns disappeared beneath Fontana Lake, with steeples, schoolyards and front porches buried below the new shoreline. Families forced uphill were promised a road back to their old cemeteries, but funding ran out after only a few miles, ending at a 1,200-foot tunnel known as the Road to Nowhere. Each Decoration Day, families return by boat and footpath, with flowers, food and children to tend graveyards cut off by the reservoir, as if the towns still stood around them. From that flooded valley, another summit carries its own tangle of names, owners and antennas, and the path now rises toward Mount Pisgah. Long before highways and trail signs, the Cherokee called this peak Elzitos, interpreted as the prophet or place of the prophet, where visions or messages may once have been sought. A frontier preacher named the ridge after the mountain, where Moses first saw the promised land but never entered it. Decades later, a large private estate absorbed Mount Pisgah, and these slopes became a private hunting ground with a lodge and forest roads instead of a public destination. The private estate became public after the owner's widow sold much of it to the government at a discount, helping create one of the eastern United States' first national forests. Today the summit stands right beside the Blue Ridge Parkway, so a family in a car can step out and start up a trail that once carried Cherokee hunters and estate guides instead of tourists. The top now shares its winds with a tall television tower and federal antennas, big metal scaffolds planted on a ridge, first named for a prophet's lookout. Hikers who love odd corners of the past eventually find their way to Jonesboro, a place known for long-running tales, historic streets, and a nearby cave said to hold the Bell Witch. This small town was founded before Tennessee even became a state, so people still call it the oldest town in the state, a kind of front porch for everything that came later. Main Street feels frozen in time. Presidents walked its boardwalks. Andrew Jackson opened his first law practice here, and many original storefronts still line the street. Jonesboro briefly became the capital of the breakaway state of Franklin, which came within a single vote of joining the Union before disappearing. A tiny hill town print shop produced The Emancipator, one of the nation's first newspapers devoted entirely to ending slavery. Every October, the National Storytelling Festival fills the streets with tents, hay bales, folding chairs, and stories that range from family jokes to epic sagas. Among those tales, few capture the imagination, like the legend of the Bell Witch, centred on a small cave near Adams, Tennessee, long linked to the haunting of the Bell family. Today, guided tours lead visitors past artefacts and into the cave, where many still report strange sounds, eerie photos, and chills they cannot explain. At the centre of these tales and cobbled streets stands the Chester Inn, a wooden hotel that once lodged presidents and still faces the main street it has watched for centuries. It is the oldest frame building still standing in Jonesboro, keeping its wooden skeleton as the rest of town changed around it. The inn became a general store, then a museum, but its original frame remained, so visitors still walk the halls that once held beds, flour barrels, and now glass display cases. Next to the inn, a two-storey log cabin called the Christopher Taylor House carries its own fame as the place where Andrew Jackson once worked as a young lawyer. It is a two-storey frontier log cabin with stacked timber walls, small windows, and a steep roof, standing like a simple brown box of hand-hewn logs in the middle of Jonesboro's town park. Guides tell of Jackson never quite leaving. Visitors talk about boots on the stairs and doors creaking on their own, as if late clients still climbed to an upstairs office. Down the hill, those old whispers give way to microphones and spotlights at the Mary B. Martin Storytelling Hall, where tales now land on a formal stage instead of a cabin floor. From spring through fall, a different performer takes the stage almost every week, and this yellow hall fills with ghost stories, family gossip, and tall tales as vivid as the street outside. Kids, parents, and grandparents fill the rows as performers from across the country prove that this town's tradition reaches far beyond these hills. When the lights come up, people leave grinning and hungry, already talking about soup beans and country ham, waiting just down the street. On cold nights long ago, a pot of pinto beans and a ham hock was not a treat but a lifeline, hot and heavy enough to carry families through an Appalachian winter. Country ham still dries in smokehouses until it turns almost rock hard, packed with salt so it can hang for months without ice or a fridge. Folks like to say that if you smelled ham in the wind, you knew a family was doing all right, because nothing was thrown away, and every scrap had a job. Now kids dunk cornbread into those same beans while parents trade stories, so dinner turns into a history lesson you can taste. Full stomachs lead to bigger questions, and conversation moves to Knoxville, a place where railroads, politics, and war all crashed together long before highways did. The town began where two big rivers meet, a launch point that once pushed boats, goods, and news between the Atlantic coast and the Appalachian frontier. As the settlement grew, leaders picked it as Tennessee's first capital, so early laws and power moves were hammered out here before many people could even find it on a map. From that beginning, Knoxville turned into a noisy hub of courts, printers, and rail yards, pulling in big arguments and big ambitions from every direction. Years later, the Civil War split the city down the middle, and neighbours found themselves on opposite sides, with one porch backing the Union and the next cheering the Confederacy. Today, the place that once fought over flags, packs markets and music halls with students, artists and die-hard sports fans, stacking new colours on top of those old battle lines. History here keeps circling back to Blount Mansion, a modest-looking home that hosted the kind of careful meetings that decide how people are supposed to live together. Its appearance gives little hint of what happened inside. In a small office out back, leaders once gathered around a plain desk and wrote the rules for an entire state. Years later, the mansion sagged and peeled so badly that someone suggested knocking it down and painting parking lines where its rooms used to be. Neighbours pushed back hard, and the building that nearly became a parking lot instead rose to become the city's only official National Historic Landmark. School groups now shuffle through its rooms while guides explain that some of the biggest decisions here were made in low voices, late at night, with only candles and ink on the table. Power once fit inside this small house, but today Knoxville also points up to the Sun Sphere, a tall gold-tinted tower first built to wow visitors at a World's Fair. The ball on top was designed to catch sunlight, like a giant energy bulb, so from the interstate it looks a bit like someone balanced the sun on a metal stick. An elevator lifts visitors to an observation deck, where kids press their noses to the windows and pick out the Great Smoky Mountains, the river, and the whole downtown below. The fair that paid for all this left Knoxville with a money headache, big empty lots, and more questions than answers about what to do with its shiny new toy. A few years later, The Simpsons took aim at that mess, joking that the Sun Sphere had turned into a forgotten wig warehouse, and fans still quote the episode when they visit. Instead of sulking, the city leaned into the joke, selling Sunsphere and Wigsphere gear, and welcoming fans who show up quoting Bart, and asking if the wigs are still inside. Some evenings the globe glows orange and gold, while just across town, Knoxville's earliest days still live inside the log walls of James White's fort. This place began as a tight cluster of cabins on a bluff over the river, where families slept, worked, and kept watch long before anyone dared call it a city. Fort walls were built from hand-cut logs locked together like a giant wooden puzzle, once meant to keep danger out, and now staring straight at glass towers and busy streets. Visitors now watch blacksmiths hammer iron, hear muskets crack, and step into rooms packed with tools, furs, and barrels, where history feels lived instead of learned. Neeby, another frontier, waits in the cold, clear flow of the Clinch River, where rare fish and mussels cling to the gravel like living treasure. For decades it stayed healthy because people mostly ignored it, while other rivers were dammed, dredged and lined with pavement. That history helped make the river one of North America's most abundant freshwater ecosystems. Here's the wild part. This single river holds around 50 kinds of freshwater mussels, while all of Europe has only about a dozen spread across countless rivers. Nearly half of these shell-covered filters are in serious trouble, yet each one cleans the water while revealing whether the river is still healthy enough to survive. One tiny catfish, the pygmy mad tom, lives in only one other river on Earth, tucked beneath shallow stones like a secret the water keeps. Lately, though, mussels that once seemed steady have begun dying in big numbers, and teams of experts are still racing to figure out why, with no single villain they can point to yet. Every shell that survives now feels like a tiny warning light for the whole system. If this river can stay clean, other worn-out rivers in the region might still have a chance. Following the water east, it eventually meets the Watauga River, a cold mountain stream with its own long run of clear flow and rocky pools. Along these banks, a band of settlers did something bold for their time. They wrote their own rules and formed the Watauga Association, governing themselves long before independence. British officials, colonial leaders, and the Cherokee all claimed the land. Rather than wait for distant rulers, the settlers wrote rules to share land, settle disputes, and keep order. Later writers called this a little republic on the Watauga, because it looked like a test run for the kind of self-rule that would soon spread across the new country. From this valley, settlers headed west, and future founders of Nashville are said to have begun by loading wagons and flatboats along the river. Those home-written rules soon took shape at Sycamore Shoals, where leaders bargained for land, raised militias, and tied their future to the river. On these riverbanks, Watauga settlers drafted one of the first written plans for self-rule west of the Appalachians, agreeing on laws while still officially beyond any formal government. A few years later, traders and Cherokee leaders met here for the Transylvania Purchase, exchanging millions of acres for trade goods piled across the grass. Not long after, Over-Mountain men gathered here for a final prayer before marching to the Battle of Kings Mountain, where they helped turn the tide of the Revolutionary War in the South. Today, Fort Watauga stands again as a reconstructed stockade. On certain weekends, musket smoke, marching drills, and the outdoor drama, Liberty, bring the park to life after dark. Many visitors leave the fort thinking less about muskets and more about mills, picturing long pans of bubbling sorghum juice being stirred down into dark, sticky molasses. That familiar mountain staple actually starts as a grass, tall sorghum cane that gets run through heavy rollers until pale green juice spills out in buckets. The juice cooks for hours in wide, shallow trays over open heat, shrinking from tens of gallons of liquid into just a few gallons of thick syrup you can pour. Once finished, the syrup became the main sweetener in many mountain homes, poured over hot biscuits, stirred into beans, and used anywhere white sugar was too costly or too rare. In Watauga County, one of the last old-style operations still fires up each fall, smoke and steam rolling out while neighbours swap recipes and wait with jars in hand. People here talk about stir-offs, long days when friends and relatives all help cut cane, feed the press and skim the foam, turning hard work into a kind of harvest party. Kids often get a small reward for their patience, dipping sticks into warm syrup or foamy molasses and eating it straight, a sticky lesson in chemistry and history at the same time. Old-timers still say a spoonful of sorghum kept the farm running because it flavoured breakfasts, sauces and home remedies without ever coming from a factory line. Meanwhile, the trail of hard, hot work continues in Mitchell County, where Emerald Village turns whole hillsides into open books of emeralds, sapphires, and feldspar. Within just a few miles, this ground has yielded everything from emeralds and aquamarine to garnets, while other mineral deposits powered a major mining industry. One emerald shaft here was so productive that Tiffany and Company drew stones from it for decades, until the tunnel flooded and was sealed, with treasure still locked below. Even with that shaft closed, visitors still claw through historic dump piles with buckets and hand tools, hoping to spot a green flash in rubble miners once walked past. Nearby, Big McKinney became one of the world's largest feldspar suppliers, providing the mineral behind Bon Ami, scouring powder used in sinks and bathtubs nationwide. That mining history is still easy to explore today. People follow a self-guided route through the old workings, passing dripping water, glowing mineral veins, and abandoned rail lines. Back in daylight, the rustic Discovery Mill, inspired by a historic mill across the road, houses 8 levels of quirky museums, shops and displays. Emerald Village even appeared on National Geographic and the Travel Channel for its blacklight tours of the world's largest public deposits of glowing hyalite opal. After dark, the underground passages transform as ultraviolet lamps make higher light and feldspar glow in vivid greens, pinks and blues hidden in daylight. Burnett Branch now does the polishing, carrying bits of broken crystal downstream and flashing them in the sun like tiny souvenirs from the tunnels above. The stream cuts a narrow groove through the mine yard, sliding over flat ledges stained orange and grey, where minerals still seep from the stone. In one short drop, it spills as a clear curtain, a compact waterfall framed by old rail lines, rusted equipment, and steep walls of quarried rock. The cascade took its name from Bon Ami, the good friend cleaner that once used powder from this ground to scrub sinks and tubs across the country. The mine may be quiet, but the water keeps moving, smoothing rough edges and carrying the past downstream, with Bon Ami linking the stream to a familiar household product. Standing here in the cool spray, with old shafts and tipples at your back, the site reveals how nature and industry continue shaping each other long after the work stops. The way water here reshapes stone feels oddly similar to Helen, where planners reshaped old lumber streets into timbered alpine lanes lined with cuckoo clocks and beer halls. By the late 1960s, the timber boom was over, storefronts sat empty, and the town was fading, until locals made one bold gamble: reinvent the place for visitors. They brought in artist John Collock, who turned memories of Bavarian villages into reality, transforming concrete storefronts with stucco, timber, steep roofs, and cobblestone paths. The gamble worked. A tiny Blue Ridge town now draws over 1 million visitors, a year to Alpine-style streets rising from land once shaped by Cherokee history, gold, and timber. Helen leans hard into the costume, with bratwurst stands, pretzel carts, beer steins, and half-timbered facades staying on theme, even as Georgia drawls fill the streets. Each fall, the town hosts a long-running Oktoberfest in the country that fills the Festhalle and Riverside decks for weeks, with oompa bands, polka lines, and tables stacked with beer and sausages. Polka beats fade into crickets and rushing water, as the next show waits up the road, where Anna Ruby Falls drops 2 separate flows into one churning, white-edged pool. Before the overlook comes into view, a low roar rolls down the half-mile paved path as 2 mountain creeks already crash side by side into the same rocky bowl. Curtis Creek drops in a high, thin vale, while York Creek crashes down shorter and heavier, the two merging at the base as Smith Creek races toward the valleys below. Mist hangs in the air and coats railings and jackets, so everything picks up a faint shine while the twin cascades keep throwing spray into the trees like a never-ending rainstorm. On busy days, this is one of North Georgia's most crowded waterfall walks. Yet the thunder at the platform is so strong that big groups often fall or shout in quick bursts over the noise. Local rangers sometimes call it nature's duet, 2 creeks sharing one stage, and joke that any argument on the deck doesn't stand a chance against a pair of falls that never stop talking. All that crashing water feels like a prelude to Yonah Mountain, where cliffs and ledges hold tales of Cherokee ceremonies, doomed lovers, and modern climbing drills. The name Yonah comes from a Cherokee word for bear, and old accounts describe this granite wall as a sacred place for vision quests and healing rites beneath open sky. Those cliffs now train in the US Army Rangers, who haul heavy packs uphill and practice mountaineering, rappels and rescue skills on rock once tied to ceremony. Local legend adds another layer, telling of Nacoochee and Sortie, star-crossed lovers whose tragic fall from the cliffs gave the valley its name. The route then leads to Tallulah Gorge, an even bigger spectacle where a river-carved chasm once drew crowds by rail to watch its waterfalls disappear into the depths. Rock walls drop close to 1,000 feet on either side, so narrow in spots that sunlight feels like a thin blade cutting down to the roaring river below. By the late 1800s, rim-top hotels, boardwalks and viewing decks drew Victorian travellers who dubbed it the Niagara of the South and watched tightrope walkers inch across the gorge. Everything changed in 1913 when a dam upstream throttled the river, silenced the roar and left the gorge with more bare rock than rushing water most days. Years after the roar faded at Tallulah, the river helped fill Watauga Lake, covering streets, houses, and the whole town of Butler so completely that only boats pass over it now. The water rose as the Tennessee Valley Authority dammed the river, folding the valley into its growing network of reservoirs for flood control and electricity. Beneath the clear water lies the only incorporated town ever drowned, where sonar still traces the mayor's office, post office, and Main Street. People call it the town that wouldn't drown, because when the lake drops, roads, foundations, and fence lines of old Butler rise from the mud like a ghost town. During one long drawdown, people who grew up in the town returned with grey hair, pointing out old bedrooms and corner stores while standing in puddles where boats usually float. Today the lake looks calm and clear, one of the cleanest in this part of the country. Yet beneath its surface rests a community that chose to move uphill rather than give up its name. That determination lives on in a roadside museum, where families match faded photographs to the shoreline before heading back down to the water. Farther along the chain, Lake Chattooge came with its own cost, flooding a Cherokee town, farm fields and graveyards to power factories, and light up the southeast. When the water settled, a whole valley slipped beneath the surface. Above it, fish now cruise over old fence lines, wagon roads and pastures. Families watched their houses burned or bulldozed before the flood, then stood on new shorelines, trying to point out where front porches and kitchen doors now sit under the waves. The changes reached even the cemeteries. Hundreds of graves were moved to higher ground, while local stories still speak of restless spirits along the shore on foggy nights. Today, boats skim over what used to be cornrows and church steps, and anglers joke that when a line snags on something hard, they have just hooked a piece of the old valley. Even so, the name Chattooge lives on. It comes from a Cherokee settlement now gone, yet every map, dock sign and weather report still says it aloud. Above the lake, forested slopes press close to the water on both sides, so from some coves it is hard to tell where the old riverbank ended and the new lake edge began. Beyond those coves, the Hiawassee River ties this flooded valley to a network of creeks, lakes and towns spanning Georgia, North Carolina and Tennessee. Cold, clear water slides over gravel beds that still hold rare freshwater mussels and wild trout, one of the few southern rivers where the original fish still feel at home. A route called the Unicoi Turnpike once followed this valley, where Cherokee traders walked for days with packs of furs, salt and stories. Over time, wagons and stagecoaches rolled onto that path, so river crossings, ferries and roadside taverns grew up around the constant rush of water. Hikers today can still follow pieces of the old turnpike through the woods, stepping over stone piles and worn grooves where hooves and boots carved a line beside the current. Along certain bends, elders tell kids to watch for old road lights, brief flashes on wet nights where lanterns from past travellers are said to flicker near the bank. Modern dams on the river now tap that same flow for electricity, while long sections upstream stay cold enough for trout and mussels to hang on. This mountain-fed river eventually pours into big reservoirs like South Holston Lake, where clear, oxygen-filled water below the dam grows legendary, wild brown trout. Construction on the dam stalled, with the concrete half in place, and the South Fork Holston River kept flowing through a valley that knew it would be flooded but sat in limbo for years. When the project resumed, hundreds of families were forced out and hundreds of graves were moved before the new lake swallowed streets and churchyards. The finished reservoir now spans northeast Tennessee and southwest Virginia, with only scattered development interrupting its forested shoreline. With little shoreline development, the water stays remarkably clear, drawing boaters who come for open views instead of busy docks. Below the dam, a wooden weir adds extra oxygen to the releases. The result is a cold, steady tailwater that insects love and brown trout use as a conveyor belt of food. Anglers travel from across the country to fish that river for unusually large wild browns, then swap stories about fish that bend rods like they're hooked to a log. Above clear water, Snake Mountain rises in the distance, its unusual amphibolite rock feeding rare plants that link the lake to the high ridges. This peak stands higher than any summit between Grandfather Mountain and Mount Rogers, yet most people in nearby towns can't point to it on a map. Soil on its slopes is unusually fertile and non-acidic for these mountains, so more than 500 plant species crowd the basin below, including flowers found at only a handful of spots in the region. A single hike up the ridge crosses 3 distinct zones: cool northern hardwood forest, open grassy bald, and bare rocky summit, like 3 habitats stacked on one spine. Most of that spine lies on private property, so conservation groups race to buy pieces of the mountain before new houses reach the crest, helping protect rare plants and habitats. Hikers sometimes talk about snake roots up here, twisted stems on the balds that seem to point toward patches of unusual plants, as if the hill itself were showing off its favourites. All these plants support plenty of wildlife too, including one very talkative owl. Barred owls have big dark eyes set in a round, pale face, while brown and white bars across the chest make the bird look almost as if it is wearing a striped shirt. This hunter favours wet woodlands and shady creeks, feeding on mice, frogs, small birds, and sometimes fish, snatching them with strong talons in one quick swoop. To make those attacks even more effective, wide wings edged with soft, fringed feathers let it fly almost silently through the trees without giving away its approach. Once darkness settles in, sharp hearing becomes its greatest advantage. It pinpoints the faint scratch of a mouse beneath the leaves, then glides down so smoothly the prey senses danger, only at the last instant. Even so, few birds are as vocal during the day, filling the mountainside with their unmistakable chorus long before sunset. Hear the familiar, "Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all?" Call carries from hollow to hollow, and when several owls answer one another, the whole ridge sounds like a forest conversation. Barred owls can be surprisingly bold. They scold hawks, yell at people, and challenge almost anything that moves, all while sounding like they're asking, "What's for dinner?" In these woods, those loud voices can also serve as alarm bells, warning smaller animals that a powerful hunter is awake and nearby. While sound rules the branches above, the forest floor holds a different kind of hunter, the timber rattlesnake, nearly silent in the leaves until its tail gives a warning of its own. Its body is thick and heavy, covered in dark chevron bands and a faint stripe that matches the browns and greys of the forest floor, so well you can stand close and never spot it. When it does not want to be stepped on, it lifts its tail and shakes fast, hollow rattle segments clicking together in a dry buzz that can stop a person in their tracks. Hills beyond the open onto a scarred basin where copper mining once turned green slopes into bare red clay, around what is now the Ducktown Basin Museum. Open roast smelting burned ore on giant heaps, stripping the hills of trees for fuel, while sulphur smoke fell as acid and killed even the grass. Just up the slope, the Burra mine preserves original buildings, rusted rails, and giant ore buckets where the destruction began. From the museum porch, raw orange soil and eroded gullies still mark the Ducktown Desert, once said to rival the Great Wall of China as a human-made landmark visible from space. Copper smoke and clear-cut hills scarred this basin, But the loss of Cherokee land reached far outside it, and Murphy stands at the centre of that history. The town sits where Fort Butler once overlooked the Hiwassee River, holding captured people before forced marches into Tennessee. Cherokee Street still follows the route those prisoners walked out of town, now an everyday roadway that traces the old path toward the deportation camps. Long before pavement, the Unicoi Turnpike crossed this river bend, first as a native trading route, then as a toll road, linking Murphy with mountain towns in Georgia and Tennessee. Families around here often trace roots to Scots-Irish farmers and German craftspeople, mixed with Cherokee relatives and African-American neighbours, all sharing the same valley. In nearby hollows, people also speak of Melungeon ancestry, with European, Indigenous and African roots passed through family trees for generations. Those threads still shape daily life here, from old ballads with Scots-Irish tunes to Cherokee names on roads and rivers, and shared meals where many histories meet at one table. Far to the east, Biltmore Estate crowns the hills like a stone castle, built by railroad wealth, in the middle of what was once raw Appalachian forest. The front facade bristles with towers, carved stone figures, and long rows of tall windows, so from the lawn it feels like a European palace dropped into the Carolina mountains. Around the house, formal gardens step down in terraces, roses, fountains and clipped hedges, before the view opens into wide fields and managed forest instead of city streets. Inside, grand staircases, towering fireplaces, art and tapestries fill nearly 250 rooms, while outside, the former estate opens into Pisgah National Forest. Past the estate's managed woods, Asheville offers a different spectacle, where debt and delay helped preserve an entire downtown of stone and brick. The city borrowed so heavily that towers and arcades survived simply because it couldn't afford to tear them down, while other places replaced theirs with parking lots. A short walk here feels like time travel. Tudor-style passageways, Beaux-Arts hotel fronts, and chunky lodge-style inns all lined up along the same streets. Guides often say the biggest urban makeover came from doing nothing, as unpaid bills protected the skyline until people realised how rare its mix of styles had become. The city is sometimes called the Paris of the South because of its dense cluster of art galleries, cafes and unusual architecture packed into a compact mountain centre. Street art and buskers now fill many corners downtown, so music, murals and food stalls often share these blocks with old stone hotels and arcades. Above it all, Asheville City Hall anchors the skyline, its stepped pink walls and octagonal metal roof standing out against the Blue Ridge like a bright exclamation mark. The tower rises like a sculpted stone hill, uniting bold, Art Deco and Cherokee-inspired patterns where European and native design come together. Walk around the base and details jump out, zigzag lines, sunbursts and stylized motifs, with corners, window frames and doorways becoming pieces of one big artwork. People once called it the most beautiful city hall in America, and many locals still joke that any meeting held inside has to work hard to live up to the building itself. This bold city hall marks the human peak of Asheville, while farther into the hills, nature steals the show with the giant stair-step falls of the Whitewater River. At Upper Whitewater Falls, the river drops in one huge leap, with a white sheet of water tumbling so far that it's often called the tallest waterfall east of the Rockies. Downstream, it plunges again at Lower Whitewater Falls, and together those drops stack close to a quarter mile of falling water in a single rocky corridor. All of this happens at the Blue Ridge Escarpment, where the mountain plateau suddenly breaks and the land plunges downward, sending calm streams into cliff-jumping torrents. Ground around the Cascades is so steep and broken that roads and houses stop at the edges, with rough trails, railings and warning signs where people have gone too close to the cliffs. Stories of fatal slips and rescue calls travel with hikers here, where the overlook reveals the power of water strong enough to drag a person over rock in moments. Higher up in Pisgah, the drama shifts from falling water to standing stone at Looking Glass Rock, with pale granite rising above the forest like a giant mountain mirror. The cliff is a single block of long-cooled magma, left behind after softer rock wore away. So now bare walls drop hundreds of feet on all sides, while trees cling only to its lower slopes. In winter, rain and mist freeze across the face and turn it into a sheet of ice that flashes in the sun, bright enough for people on the Blue Ridge Parkway to spot it from far off. Climbers treat these walls as a huge outdoor gym, following hundreds of routes across the rock, while Peregrine falcons claim the ledges as high nests and launch pads. Hikers who reach the summit stand on stone older than most surrounding peaks, looking down at roads, creeks and forests that suddenly feel small compared with this single block. Among climbers, a favourite winter tale is that when the ice is perfect, the rock feels less like a hill and more like a vertical frozen river, with each swing of an ice tool biting into glassy skin. At the base of that mountain range is a much smaller, easier waterfall to enjoy. Looking Glass Falls drops about 60 feet in one smooth sheet, close enough to the highway that you can see the full curtain of water from your car. A short stone stairway leads down to the pool, so kids, grandparents and tired hikers end up side by side, watching creek water slam into the basin in a single bright splash. Film crews have used this spot as a ready-made set, and during cold snaps the entire falls can freeze solid, with flowing water becoming a thick wall of ice. When the ice is strong, climbers strap on crampons and swing their tools into that frozen sheet, treating the falls itself as a vertical playground of frozen water. Up on Brasstown Bald, the forest drops away and the bald crest opens a full circle of sky where Cherokee tradition speaks of a great canoe and a world covered in water. Cherokee speakers called the mountain Place of Fresh Green, but settlers misheard the name as a reference to Brass, creating Brasstown by mistake. At about 4,784 feet, this is Georgia's highest point, high enough for the tree line to fade and open views to span 4 states. On clear days, the lookout feels like a sky-level balcony, with the Atlanta skyline glowing to the south and the hazy band of the Great Smoky Mountains lining the north. Ahead waits Dry Falls, where visitors can stand in a rock shelter behind the roar, close enough to touch the spray, yet still stay dry. The Cullasaja River drops about 75 feet over an overhanging cliff, and a short trail ducks right behind the white sheet of water, like walking behind a giant shower. In winter, mist can freeze on the rock and build ice along the face, so the walkway feels like a chilly cave with a moving wall of water guarding the front. The last spray drifts away down the gorge, and the mix of cliffs, forest and river settles into a calm that feels just right for the Southern Appalachian mountains. This is the Southern Appalachians Mountains, a land of hidden wonders and remarkable architectural marvels. Now, if you don't want to miss the most unreal wonders of the Colorado Plateau, check out this video.